All right. Well, there's still folks that are coming in, but let's get this thing rolling because excited to dig into the conversation. Welcome everyone to a Topsoil podcast. Mitchell Hora here with you. Excited to talk about farmland and legacy and family farms and all that. A little bit different than a lot of how our topics have been here recently and over the last multiple months and whatnot. So excited to switch it up a little bit and chat with one of my old buddies in this space. Been hanging out for a number of years now, just kind of back and forth. We'll turn it over to Johnny here in just a little bit. But for everyone, a little background on Continuum Ag. Get it started. We're hosting the webinar. We're a software company based in Washington, Iowa. I'm the founder and I'm a seventh generation farmer. And we really focus on helping farmers manage their data, focusing on putting it together into a carbon intensity score, getting that third party verified, and helping you to monetize your data with things like the 45Z tax credit and other opportunities like that. But really, at the end of the day, our mission is to help a million family farms improve their profitability via improving their soil health. And in order to make sure that family farms are still going to be viable and be profitable, land is a huge component of that, as we all know. So we have to take care of our land. We have to build up those soils, not deplete them, make sure that things are healthy, and we leave them even better than how we found them. And I think that'll resonate throughout the whole thing today, but it's where it all ties together. But yeah, today we got my buddy Johnny in from Indiana. Johnny's a real estate expert. Uh, he's the land man is what I call him, and that's what he goes by online. Very active on social media. That's where we first got connected. But Johnny's been out to my farm. We've ran into each other at a bunch of different events and stuff over the last just about a decade or so, probably. Working back and forth on stuff. But Johnny recently wrote a book and American Family Farmland. I'm going to let him explain some more about it, but he sent me a copy of it, mostly out of the blue. We've been talking back and forth on doing some Johnny and his marketing expert Kristen, who I met through the Fieldwork podcast back in the day for the OGs that are on and were fans of the Fieldwork podcast. Kristen was part of the Fieldwork podcast. Now been helping Johnny. We've been doing blogs and working with each other on that. And then he sent me a copy of his book. I read it and I'm like, wow, this is really, really good stuff, really insightful. And we need to talk about it more. More of our audience at Continuum Ag needs to be aware of it. Should definitely check out the book, but also let's dig into it a little bit more. And Johnny's nice enough to be sending everybody that's on this, send everybody a copy of the book for free. So we'll let him dig into that a little bit more. But yeah, we got a bunch that we want to dig into here today. I'm obviously not in the office, so apologize for that. But if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A or in the chat. We just want to have conversation here with everybody. But Johnny, why don't number one, thanks for hopping on here today. Thanks for sending me a copy of the book and for everybody that's on here as well. But maybe give a little bit of your background and stuff because I think it's important to tee this up that just like me, everything that I've built here at Continuum, it's been because of my family farm and things are going to bring value to your family farm. And I think that really resonates with you too, that you're so passionate about what you're doing because you've lived it and it's your true authentic story. So let's start with that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mitchell. It's an honor to be here today, and I love everything that Continuum's been doing for a lot of years. So, yeah, the book American Family Farmland. I mean, my story's in there. Our family sold the family farm. And it deeply affected me. It affected my parents, a lot of those relationships. But it was a catalyst in hindsight for what I do today. I'm really passionate about the family farm. I do a lot of consulting work, a lot of mediation work with families, help them through the difficult conversations at the kitchen table or, in the tractor cab for what's next.
Mhm.
Can we keep it? Should we keep it? What happens when there's 16 owners or 32 owners of the farm, and how can we keep the family farm viable? So, but
Yeah.
I grew up on a farm, family farm in Indiana, and I'm at my home office here on my own farm in Warren County, Indiana.
Yeah, that's what's cool, right? Because how old were you when your family ended up selling the farm?
I was actually in my 20s,
Okay, 20s.
but
Yeah.
old enough to be really affected by it, but also at
Yeah.
an age where I couldn't buy the family farm,
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. So
Yeah. And but now you've been kind of starting from scratch, adding back on to your own stuff. And that's, I think that was a pretty cool part of the story for me. Is like, okay, you've gone through it, you've seen the hard decisions that your parents had to go through. You were there, you were obviously plenty old enough to really understand and be part of the conversation, and just wasn't in the cards.
yeah,
But and I think a lot of times these conversations, it's not always is it in the cards financially, yay or nay, but there's so many other components that go into the conversation around like, hey, the family farm is transitioning, maybe grandma just died or whatever, and like it's being passed on to that generation or whatever the situation may be. But it's not all about money. And I think you lay that out really, really well. Do you want to maybe start with that? And like when somebody's going through a transition, how do you start? Like, what is question number one or conversation number one? And especially think about maybe anybody that's on here that maybe in that situation where they recently inherited ground or know that they will in the near future. What's question number one where you start when that's going on?
yeah, and it's really not even a question. It's really step one is listening.
Mhm.
And when there's a lot of people at the table, that's not always an easy thing to do. Some families are great at it. They get together every Sunday or whatever it happens to be for a family meal. Other families, the dynamic is not so great. Some families only talk through attorneys. And sometimes I sit in the middle of multiple attorneys to have these kinds of conversations. But it really starts with listening. And deep down, I've always thought about the value of land as so much more than price per acre. To me,
Mhm.
the family farm is not about price per acre. Sure, is there an operating line that maybe, we're leveraging, the family farm for, and our banker can put a dollar figure on it, but it's so
Yeah.
much more than that, especially when there's multiple generations involved. And every conversation that I'm involved with, that's usually where we start. We start with listening, getting perspectives from all of the stakeholders at the table so we can come up with a plan that honors legacy, but also keeps in mind, what the goals are for the future.
Yeah. When as I'm sitting here thinking about that, right, it's even within the family farm, there's certain parcels of ground that maybe mean a little bit more than others, right? There's
Sure.
certain, so it's not even just the entirety of the farm, but it's each individual field, each component. Um, some of them are priceless, right? Some of
Yeah.
them are priceless. Some of them, it's like, yeah, it's just a land asset. It is worth just money, but regardless, like there's always just a deeper part of that conversation, I suppose. But and how do you gather that? Like, what does that look like? So you're listening, trying to hear everybody out, um, and it's just listening for like what, or like what are some of those key drivers that help to guide you towards whatever's next?
Yeah. Well, part of the goal that every family is going to have or typically has is there's usually somebody at the table that has a very strong emotional connection to the farm. Maybe it's the farmhouse, right? Maybe it's that specific field like you
Yeah.
mentioned, and sometimes it becomes very clear that that's not even part of the conversation. We're not even going to consider selling that part of the farm, or maybe that's the core part we're going to pass along. But we've got to evaluate emotional connectivity to the farm. We've got to get into the financial side of it, because a lot of times succession planning, you've got land assets, you may have equipment assets, there could be other assets involved that might be life insurance policies or, IRAs or other sort of investment vehicles that are involved. I'm typically only involved on the farmland asset side, but we've got to look at emotions, we've got to look at finances, and and by listening, sometimes together in the room, all at once, a lot of times the real important things come out when I have private conversations. People can let their guard down, because maybe it's just they don't want to express something maybe at the kitchen table, and
Yeah.
that's really how we get there.
Yeah, it's the one-on-one plus the group stuff, right? But
Yeah.
you really dig deep into it in the book of like kind of your framework and your
Hmm.
like process.
Yeah.
Um, and my understanding is you just developed it over time, right? Is that kind
Yeah.
of the story there? Maybe walk us through
Yeah.
that and kind of outline like your process, or obviously people need to read the book, but dig into kind of your process, your guidelines, as deep as you want.
Sure. And but coming full circle back to, what is the value of land, right? You could ask everybody in the chat today, what's the value of land to you? And we will get it most likely a different answer from every single person. And that's
Mhm.
really where the framework started was, what are land values,
Yeah.
and when you ask somebody, what are your personal values? And then how do you apply that to land? You quickly find that again, you've got emotional, duty, principle, right? And then you've got financial values, and
Mhm.
most of the time, people either are distinctly in one category or they overlap all three, And so the land values framework is really about starting there, identifying what your personal values are, what your emotional goals or history or tie to the farm is, and then ultimately, what are your financial values and financial goals, and how can we bring that all together to come up with a plan that works best for your farm?
Yeah, and it's got to be just every single time. I feel like it's got to be something different every time, and especially when you have a bunch of individuals sitting around the table too, who a lot of times have spouses, maybe have kids and stuff themselves. Like they're all thinking about it differently. So, but what are
Yeah.
some of those ways that what are some of those ways you can kind of plan for that day? Like, are there things that you encourage people to be thinking about even like well ahead of time?
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, every family's different, every conversation is different, and I think that's important to just pause there too for a second and recognize that. In the book, I bring in a few different family stories, of some complex family dynamics, nine siblings with nine spouses,
Yeah. Yeah.
those are some thorny problems, and then even another family that's in a complete opposite situation, where it's, reimagining and reinventing the farm.
Yeah.
And part of telling those actual stories of my clients, and there's also some smaller, little vignettes
Yeah.
in there, but part of telling those stories is to allow, you know, the reader to sort of pause and reflect and say, okay, we have that dynamic in our family, right? Or we don't have that. However, my uncle really feels strongly about this, or, my
Yes.
mom feels really strongly about this, and so what I ultimately did with the book though was I created an entire series of like downloads or companion materials.
Mhm.
And it's really the stuff that my paid consulting clients that I walk them through, right? And so in the book, and everybody that signed up for the webinar today, I mean, there's a QR code, right in the beginning of the book and throughout several chapters. Scan the QR code, download all the companion materials, and if you're facing a challenge that maybe is just how do I even communicate with my family members, there's an entire download that gives you
Yeah.
some quick tips and great questions you can start with, and sort of
I
frame it
love
and where are
uh,
you now,
I love that it's like it's kind of got workbook in it and your process, but it also is all about real like stories and stuff where every single farm is going to be different, right? Where like at least when I was reading it, it's like, okay, my farm is different than this. My family dynamic is really wild, but you can always like get like, okay, yeah, I see a little bit of this. A part of this story is part of my story. A part of this one is part of mine. And like, oh yeah, I see maybe a different, customer or neighbor or whatever, where like, okay, yeah, that would be like similar. I've seen that before, right? So it all just it all just really like resonated, I think. Whether it be direct or yeah, kind of by association. I thought that was just a good way to tie it in and make it real, right? Where it's not just like a workbook. And to your point, you've got the workbook pages there that you can go and download. But it it more so just I thought it did a good job of connecting where it's like, okay, I've kind of seen that before. You call him, uncle, whatever. Well, everybody's, can think about who that would be in their situation. So I
Yeah.
know. I thought that was a good way to go about it.
Well, I'm glad it resonated with you in that way because I intentionally wrote the book the way that I have conversations with my clients. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't lecture my clients, right? That's not what I do, right? My job is to listen, to guide people from point A to point B. And so, when I met with my publisher and the book strategist, I mean, I was very clear with them up front, like, hey, my book, I want people to pick up this book and read it and feel like we're kind of sitting at their kitchen table together, or we're in the combine, or we're sitting on the tailgate of the pickup truck in the field, because that's where all of my conversations happen. And so, I did be intentional about that. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from that standpoint too, that a lot of people say, hey, it resonated with me because of the stories, but also because you didn't point a finger at me and say, this is how you're supposed to do
Yeah,
it.
no. No, I think that was clear that like there was no silver bullet. There was no answer
No.
in the book. The book did
Yeah.
not give an answer of here's how it was done, here's the best way, and Johnny's just the ultimate like guy ever. No, like that was not the case. It was you got to kind of figure it out. And here's just a framework and how to think through it. So I thought that was cool. But from a logistics standpoint, like, I don't know. I mean, how did you actually do it? Like, did you sit down and like you typed it all out, or did you have like a ghostwriter of sorts, or like how'd you actually go about it? Like, how did the how did the book come about?
Yeah. Well, the original idea for the book happened in 2019,
Hmm,
while Carrie and I were sitting around a campfire in our backyard. And I told her, I said, I have this idea, right? And it's called land values. And I kind of just laid it all out there for her. And I said, I don't know what it's gonna turn into or how I
yeah,
can properly express this, but the idea was born in 2019, just right here, at our own farm. But it's been with me forever. My concept of land values is part of our family story. And growing up on the family farm, it's in all the conversations that I've had over the years with clients. Um, but the physical act of writing the book was not easy. I remember, being on a call like this with my publisher, and they're saying, okay, well, based on everything we've talked about, you just need to write 45,000 words, right? And then I'm like, did you say 45,000
it seems
words?
like a lot.
And so I definitely went through a period of a few months of just pure writer's block. I did not know where to start at all. I
Yeah,
really didn't. And then
yeah,
again, one day, just sitting on the porch, just kind of taking in everything at the farm, it dawned on me, I'm just going to start by writing my story.
yeah,
What happened, what it was like growing up on the farm, what happened when our family had to make that decision to sell the farm. And that's where I started. My book strategist and the publisher, we went through a period where, we did these sort of intense interviews over about a 14-day process where almost every day for 2 weeks, we'd have like a 2-hour intensive like coaching session essentially. And I walk them through what I do with my clients from start to finish. And then we turned it into some bite-sized chunks. We kind of said, all right, here's section 1, 2, 3, and you need this many chapters. And hey, your goal for chapter 1 is 4,000 words, right? And once we
yeah.
got to that point, it really started flowing. But
Yeah.
it's it just took a while to get there.
Yeah, it seems like kind of got broken down into smaller chunks because that's the good thing about like you like I read it cover to cover, which is normally how I read books, but there's some of like the pages where I like bookmark those of like, okay, hey, this is a really important thing, like to come back and revisit because it's not all like you're not gonna be in the here and now for every part of the story. So
That's right.
but one of the so I'm thinking about this, for my family farm. I'll tell, kind of talk specifically about like some of my own questions and everyone listening too. toss your questions in the chat and stuff also. I'm thinking about it as like I'm thinking about my kids, right? Or me and like my parents. My parents are, my dad's in his low 60s, mom's in her mid 50s. They're they're not like our my my parents' farm isn't going to transition for at least another 30 years, right? I'm going to be into my 60s by the time that God willing, by the time that it is being passed down. I'm going to be in my 60s 30 some years from now. How do you think about like, are there some tips or some like best practices for thinking about it in that long of a term? And I'm thinking about like, how do I invest in a Roth or in money that will be building and be ready at that time if I need to buy out some siblings? Or um, should there be health, like life insurance policies? And do you use life insurance money to be able to do it? Or what's going to happen? Because obviously policy and stepped up basis and some of these things, taxes, we can't predict what it's going to look like in 30 years. But are there any of those things that you advise, younger folks? I'm assuming a lot of, there'd be plenty of others on the call today that are kind of looking at it in my same kind of time frame where it's like, this isn't happening now, may not be happening for at least another 10 years or more. But are there any of those things that you've seen work really well that can help?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times when I talk with my clients, I mean, we talk about this process similar to soil health, right? It's a long-term play, like
Yep.
you're investing today for a dividend that may not return, this season, so to speak,
Right.
right? And so I think, with the probably the type of the folks that are on the call today, they're already in that sort of mindset, right? They're thinking long term, they're thinking about what they can do today to prepare for, 5 and 10 years down the road. But yeah, we work with a lot of families that maybe the farm, maybe mom and dad thought the best way to pass the farm along was, tenants in common or undivided interest. And ultimately that creates a lot of problems in families where dynamics aren't smooth per se.
Yeah.
We work with a lot of estate planning attorneys where maybe we move the farm ownership from, maybe tenants in common, undivided interest, or an LLC, maybe to a limited family limited partnership, especially when you've got families where you've got farming siblings or heirs, right? And you have non-farming siblings or heirs, limited partnerships tend to be a great way to create some value there to where when certain families maybe want to exit, but other families want to take over ownership of the farm. You've got some mechanics and some language in there for how that can work. And life
Okay.
insurance policies can play a really big role in that part as well. And so it's very common that whole and term life insurance policies can be part of the structure going forward.
Or bring some cash into it if people want that, because you don't want to necessarily sell the farm, but to buy
Right.
people out, it takes money to do it. But what about, so you're thinking more, you typically see it being done like through that a limited family partnership or whatever you called it. But what about like, you see stuff, online about putting it in a trust instead? Is there a spot when that, like, where would that maybe make sense versus just putting it in some kind of LLC, not an LLC, but a LLP of some sort.
Yeah, we see a lot more trust when heirs maybe don't farm at all. We
Um,
typically see that, or where there's a lot of other assets at play. The family limited partnership seems to be more prevalent. In a fully working operational farm with a lot of sort of farm specific assets, whereas trusts may incorporate a lot of other non-ag related or
Sure.
non-farm assets.
Okay. And are some of those things like, do you typically see people setting that up like well ahead of time, or those are kind of like can be set up like when transitions are happening?
Yeah, I would say the families who do it best and who take the best advantage of tax opportunities. Mind you, I'm not an attorney and I'm not an accountant, right? Full
Me neither.
disclosure
Me neither.
disclaimer there, right?
Yeah.
But The families that do it best start having the conversations today. They don't
Yeah.
wait until mom and dad are, health has declined, or maybe somebody's going to a nursing home, right? A lot of times when a family comes to me and they say, hey, we don't want to sell the farm, but, mom or dad is in a nursing home and the bills are this much a month, sometimes it's too late at that point in time,
Yeah.
especially if long-term capital gains are a really big part of the equation. We were really fortunate this year. We had a client that unfortunate situation that someone's in a nursing home and none of the estate planning had been done, but fortunately we were able to work with the farm tenant to buy out just a small portion of the farm, but do it
Yeah.
on contract sale. That way we could really, the accountant really came in and said, hey, here's how much we could save on capital gains taxes, which would really give you this much more capital to take care of dad while he needs it, and then still retain the core of the family farm and, sort of preserve the legacy that,
Yeah.
multiple generations had built. So,
Yeah, it's huge. Let's talk a little bit about like what you're seeing in land right now, because it seems like at least around my neck of the woods, like there's quite a bit of, it seems like there's quite a bit of land that's trading hands. I don't know how it is out in Indiana and throughout the whole rest of like your territory and stuff, but I know you got a good grasp on this. Can you just maybe speak to that a little bit on what you like this current status of farm ground and stuff that's going up for sale and like what's driving some of maybe just hot
yeah.
takes and stuff there.
Yeah, sure. There's certainly a certain percentage of farms that are in just this sort of transition phase. Parents or grandparents passed away. It's gone to the next generation. They're one or two generations removed from the family farm, and capital and access to capital allows them to do different things with their life. And I go in the book, because for some people, inheriting the farm, is it gives them the capital to do something that they've been dreaming of, and right, wrong, or indifferent, that's not for me to say. But,
Yeah.
if mom and dad or grandma and grandpa built this farm to make their families' lives more enriched, sometimes that means writing a new chapter. But when it comes to just specific land transactions, around here, top quality farms, we haven't seen a whole lot of shift in land values on top quality farms. They're still staying strong. If a farm that's pattern tiled has great soils, great fertility and yield history, it's selling about as strong as it did a couple of years ago, right? But the inventory of those types of farms is, it's slim to none. The inventory, at least here in West Central Indiana, of what I would say average quality or maybe below quality, below average farms, I think has seen a little bit of an uptick, right? And so we've seen, and that's typically how the trends happen, right? Your average or below average farms, you start to see the shift in values there first before any sort of top quality farms. But we've seen that for sure. A little more inventory of those kinds of farms, but I mean, there's still a lot of farms selling at really strong prices. I mean, we've had some pretty big transactions this year. We just put about an 800-acre farm in West Central Indiana under contract, and that was over 15,000 an acre, and there's still a lot of farms trading at those levels. However, there's a lot of farms that are in the 8,000 and $9,000 an acre range too. So, like anything, it's driven by location improvements, what the ROI potential is, and hey, does that farm sit next to me or is it, across the county? So, I will say there's a lot of investor money that continues to be in the farmland market space. I mean, I think the private equity, investments are up is kind of what I'm seeing. There's a lot more individual investors and institutional investors that are continuing to purchase farmland.
Yeah. In Iowa, we don't see it quite as much, right? Because of some of the legal protections, but it's still very much there. We just a couple weeks ago, there's 900 acres that sold in our neck of the woods, and anywhere from 15.1 to like 16.6 or 16.9 an acre, something like that. And it's like average farm ground, like definitely like it's okay, it's good, but definitely not like anything amazing. And for that much of it to go, and it got split up to like I think eight or so different buyers, which was good to see, and locals and all that, which was nice. But still it's like, man, pretty high for especially compared to what it was 8 years ago. But yeah, it seems like it's not. Are you seeing any indication that like do you anticipate that things will go down over the coming like next years, like because of like farm economics and stuff right now, or like not really seeing much on the horizon that's gonna change?
Yeah, I mean, I think top quality farmland will always remain, a highly desired asset class, from an investment standpoint, and the trends that we're seeing is that the prices are reflective of that, and they haven't shifted
I
much. But inventory is also down of that type of farm, and so you've got supply demand. But I think for anybody who is considering, investing in some more farmland, it's a good time to keep your eyes and ears peeled, and if you know somebody that's in that space or, is working with landowners on the regular, there's opportunities that are out there. They're not
mean,
everyday opportunities, but when they do come up, you got to be ready because when that farm does come up and it's priced right, there's some good opportunities, especially on those farms that would be sort of like that, not a class A farm, but maybe a B or a C farm that you could make some long-term improvements on, whether that's soil health or tile or whatever the type of improvement might be. I mean, to me, that's where I would be eyeing the prize, I guess, unless it's the farm right next door.
yeah. Then you gotta kind of gotta do it, huh?
Yeah.
Um, the dad, we had a meeting last week, and had some farmers brought in and a new kind of concept being built out. The meeting was we were talking about Bitcoin and stuff, and some of these alternative investments and stuff, and Bitcoin and crypto and Web3 blockchain stuff. And what Dad was listening to some podcast or something yesterday, and or a couple days ago, called and was like, "Hey, you should ask Johnny about this and see what he thinks on the webinar." So somebody was talking about how investors are looking at farmland as a good investment, that there's only so much of it and it's going to continue to hold value. And they were attributing that to, well, now maybe investors aren't going to care as much about farmland and more so look at Bitcoin and some of these other things, that there's also a finite amount of it and some of the same principles apply, but maybe the Bitcoin can go up faster or be a little bit more liquid, right, than what farmland would be. Are you, like, what's your take on that, I guess, or like thoughts and whatnot there of or any chatter about that on like investors coming in
Yeah. Well,
versus looking at alternative investments?
thank you, Brian Hora, for the question.
Yeah,
First and foremost, but
yeah.
I don't know if anybody out on the webinar today knows Shay Folk in Illinois, but Shay's a consultant, does a lot of succession planning, and he asked me a similar question a couple of months ago. And I think ultimately, everybody looks at it differently, but there's a lot of unknowns to those types of investments, right? I mean, it's always about risk versus reward, right? I mean, even when we go to your insurance agent and you buy a whole life policy, right? They're going to put you through a questionnaire asking you what your risk tolerance is, right? But the intangibles of hard land assets, that's the value of land, right? And that's where it resonates with people differently, right? I mean, you're a seventh generation farmer. I mean, there's no price on your backyard family farm, but
Right. That's right.
yeah, it's priceless, right? And so, is it happening? The answer is yes. I mean, we work with families that don't farm at all, but their parents and grandparents, built this amazing legacy through their hard work and blood, sweat, and tears on the family farm, and they hold on to every one of those assets. And once they either are debt free or become debt free, some of them leverage some of that farmland to invest in these other assets, and some
Sure.
of it is blockchain and Bitcoin, but you know. I don't know. Most of the folks that I work with, tend to value land differently than they do those types of assets. But I know plenty of people. I've got plenty of clients I could pull up my contacts right now that have put a lot of money into Bitcoin and has it
Yeah,
paid off. I don't think anybody, unless they got in real early, has said that it's
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it was just interesting to to be thinking about that, right? Of like the competition of family farms trying to compete against investors, right, for
Yeah.
land.
Yeah. It's
And
tough.
I would I would think that it would definitely tough from just like, man, like land's expensive. These guys have deep pockets, tough to compete. But
Yep.
I would think like, gosh, looking at the price of land and what you can rent it out for, your IRR can't be that overly exciting compared to some of these other investments. I think that was kind of the
Yeah.
point of,
Yeah.
what
Sure.
Dad was getting at, what they were talking about in this
Yeah.
podcast stuff he was listening to is like, sure, farmland, like you're not gonna like lose money in farmland, especially if you're thinking about it as a long term
Sure.
for 10, 20 years or more, like that's great. But like compared to other assets, if you're just cash rented out or something, like
Yeah.
it's not
And
that exciting.
yeah, and that's where, these conversations I have with a lot of families, it comes into play, right? Because the families who maybe aren't as connected to the farm or they're a generation or two removed, they
Yeah.
recognize those things. And maybe it's not necessarily Bitcoin, right? But I mean, it
Yeah,
might
yeah.
it might be, a residential duplex or some other type of real estate investment or a condo in Florida or something like that, where the rate of return just renting it out on Airbnb might be more like 8% or
Yeah.
9%,
Yeah.
and those are a lot of the conversations that we often have, especially with the heirs that would like to exit from the farm because, they're thinking about it from a different standpoint, right? They're looking out for their own personal well-being, their kids' well-being, and, the farm, if it doesn't quite have the same emotional meaning that it had to a previous generation, they like to unlock that capital and invest in different spaces.
Yeah. I mean, I don't blame them, right? Like even looking at it, it's like we farm because we love it, right? And because we're
Yeah,
passionate about it, and we have a real calling for it. Like you don't farm because it's the biggest money maker, that's for
sure.
sure. Or even to own land and stuff that's the biggest money. Like, sure, is it gonna? Are you gonna lose money owning farmland? Like, probably not. But is it gonna be this amazing, return like in other asset classes?
Yeah, I think
That's
most people get their return through the intangibles, right? I
yeah,
mean, if you're investing in farmland or you've inherited the family farm, it's generations of wealth being built up, But, a lot of my clients, they may be leveraging the farm that they're inheriting, right, to do something different. I mean, I've got clients that have large portfolios of thousands of acres, right, and they're not farming a bit of it, right? They're just sort of loosely managing it themselves. It's cash
yeah,
flow positive, right, and they're taking those returns and they're diversifying in other areas, right, but their
yeah,
land asset base remains strong throughout their
yeah.
lifetime. So and then there's other families where we've done really interesting creative things, where a family member is would could never put a price on the family farm, right? It is priceless, right? And we've actually implemented what are called agricultural conservation easements on that farm, right? And we've carved out. Maybe it was where the old farmhouse used to sit, or maybe it's this beautiful grassy knoll with oak trees that overlooks the creek, right? And we carved that out and put these conservation easements on it that say, hey, this little spot right here, it has to forever stay agriculture, right? Whether that's row
Yeah.
crops or, maybe it's prairie grass or whatever it is, right? And then that allows the family to sort of, find the middle ground into what the next chapter looks like.
I'm glad you brought that up because as I was reading through the book, and I've heard about these things before, but you explain it better in the book, and I was able to think about it more. I'm kind of torn on the idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I'm like, okay, I understand the purpose, right? To make sure that it doesn't just get grown up in houses, right?
yeah,
And something
sure.
else and keeping farm ground. But also it's like, dude, you're dead. You don't get a say anymore. Somebody else is owning this. They get to do it. Like, so I don't know. I'm a little
Yeah,
torn on it where it's like I understand the purpose and reasoning for it, but I also like capitalism and like freedom,
sure.
So I
Yeah.
kind of see it both ways. But
Well,
how do
yeah.
those work? Can you set like because what if like are those things going to hold up for another 300 years or whatever? And like, or is there? I mean, there's like maybe. are there other intricacies to those where it's like eventually, if really like it's the only piece of farm ground in the middle of a city, or like it we develop other systems in 100 years, like or I don't know, like
Yeah,
how's
well,
that gonna work?
yeah, it's often difficult when you start thinking about those big philosophical questions right there. Like nobody knows what 300 years
Yeah,
is like from now, but I mean, if it's an appurtenant easement and it runs with the deed, it's going to continue in perpetuity, right?
yeah,
And that's what those things are meant to do. I was working with a family in upstate New York, where farmland. It's not big row crops, right? It's different. It's vegetables and it's fruits and it's orchards and those kinds of things. And
yep,
a couple hundred acres in upstate New York is a coveted piece of ground. And it's really interesting the conversations that happen around those kinds of farms because they were settled obviously way earlier than Indiana
yeah,
and Illinois and Iowa, and there's a lot of history out there. And so you see a lot of that in those areas, where big urban centers have like really encroached on agricultural production. You see it a lot more out there. You see it a lot out west. Colorado does a lot of conservation easements, but water rights are big out there too. So those are some different
yeah,
dynamics. But yeah, I mean, there's the conversation about agricultural conservation easements sometimes is really positive and sometimes it's just indifferent, because
yeah.
again, how do you do it right? Because uh, coming back to your point, is if you place an agricultural conservation easement, you also have to be really mindful of the future, right? Like, what does agriculture mean 25 or 50 or 100 years from now? And nobody has
Right.
the crystal ball, but that's where the conversations with everybody at your table are important, right? Just because, you've got an heir to the family farm or somebody that's in your family that is not farming doesn't mean they don't have a skill set or have a thought about the future of the farm that
Sure.
is not valuable, right? And that's where the listening really comes into play.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause it's like, yeah, it's hard to tell what's going to happen in the long term. So, but I mean, I would assume some of those you can put like a time frame on it, can't you?
Yeah, you can for sure. I mean, you can put deed restrictions that only last a certain number of years,
Sure.
and you can put easements that only last a certain number of years. So it doesn't always have to
Yeah,
be in perpetuity, but a lot of times people, they've got that peace of mind that at least during their lifetime, right, this is how it's
yeah,
going to be. And
yeah,
if the next generation chooses something different, then so be it.
yeah. No, that makes sense. So I've been thinking a lot about like with the farmland that's transitioning, with the prices still being high, and like at least looking at it with traditional finance, like if you're going to buy $15,000 an acre farm ground and attempt to just put it on a mortgage, it don't work. The math, if you're going to farm it yourself, the math don't math, like not even close. If you're buying $15,000 an acre farmland, you got to put 25% down, and then on a 20-year mortgage, your mortgage payment will be about $1,000 an acre. Farm revenue isn't even $1,000 an acre for the mass majority of us. So we got to find some alternatives, right? It's gonna have to look different. It's gonna have to change up somehow. A company that we've had them on the show before, but a company called Fractal, my buddy Ben is a founder of, where it's kind of bringing in some investor money where you can kind of get a secondary mortgage on an asset you already have and free up some capital to go do some stuff. I think there's things like that that may be interesting, but is that something you're thinking about too, Johnny, or have kind of a take on of like, 'cause it seems like there could be some exciting stuff come in the future of like so much land that will be transitioning just by people. A lot of the land is owned by people that are old.
Mhm.
It's going to have to transition somehow. But I just don't know if all the capital is there, at least in the current ag community and family farms, to be able to do it all the way that we've always done it. So
Yeah.
I know I'm definitely trying to think about like over the next 30, 50 years, what is that going to look like? But didn't know if you're think about that or have a take or any things you're seeing that are interesting and different?
Yeah, I mean, it's geography plays a pretty key role in a lot of those conversations. I mean, farms that are near urban centers or urban
Yeah.
areas, they've got totally different opportunities than, Washington, Iowa, right? I mean, it's just the facts because of where
Yeah.
you're geographically located. You've got a
Yeah.
lot of hogs out there, right? Therefore, you've got access to manure. You've got other things you can do, to help with profitability on your farm and nutrients. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of diversification that's happening out there. Agritourism is a real thing. It's not just this trend that started a few years ago. Like it's a real thing. People diversify. A lot of people that are near an urban center or even near a university, I mean, they've pulled barn into an Airbnb. That's a really common thing that a lot of people do. I mean, people just like to get away and get away from town and have an experience, right? And so, a lot of clients that I work with that might have farms in those kinds of locations, we think about those things. Um, but there's also just a lot of transitional development happening everywhere, whether it's wind turbines or solar or, you know, uh, commercial or industrial projects. I mean,
Mm.
farmland gets encroached on all the time by these other uses, right? And so it's important to think about those things and how can the farm remain profitable. I mean, it's not an easy task. I'm not out there farming row crops, but I am really fortunate that I sit in an area where we've got a really interesting blend of a lot of just traditional row crop farmers, right? But we also have dairies nearby, so there's alfalfa contracts and opportunities to do a few different things. I mean, our farm sits 15 minutes from like Rick Clark's farm, right? I mean, they do things completely out of the box. It's not for everybody, right? But it is highly profitable. The path that they've gone down. We're about 20-ish minutes from Dan DeSutter's farm, right? They do some interesting things with livestock integration and they have a direct to consumer model with their beef as well. But yeah, it's a challenging environment and a challenging space, and that's why I think too, like even if you have non-farming heirs who have skill sets, whether it's finance or marketing or whatever it happens to be, those conversations are just really important to have sooner rather than later
Yeah.
because that person may have a fantastic idea for helping preserve the family farm for another generation, whatever that might look like. And I think those are the conversations that need to be had. So.
Yeah. No, I like that. And it's all just it's again, there's no silver bullet, right? Every single piece is unique. And there's just so much to think about too, which is why again, uh like it takes time to go through some of this stuff and to think through how can we make it work? What should we do? And or I suppose that's what should we do and what can we do? Then figuring out okay, how are we gonna do it? But um yeah, just so much to think about over a long time frame, I think too. But to your point, getting creative and figuring out like what do you want it to look like? And yeah, for me, I'm thinking about it as being seventh generation. How do I enable the next seven generations? Hopefully at least enable the next generation, but thinking about just super long term. And it's there's a lot to that. There's a lot
Yeah.
there and how American ag is going to look and just how much it's changed in the last 10, 30 years, but obviously over the last 100, it's completely different. So you think about the next 100, it's like it's going to be unrecognizable to what we have today, I have to assume.
Yeah, I mean that's why I think soil health is really important. I mean preserving that top 6 inches of soil is critical to the long-term success of the family farm
Yeah.
because growth isn't always the answer, right? I mean buying that $15,000 an acre farm may be the worst decision you could make potentially,
Yeah.
right? But maybe bringing in a third party financial advisor to look at the farm maybe more holistically and say, hey, how could we diversify what we're doing? Are there other local markets we could go after, or how could we reimagine what we already have, is
Mm,
often the best place to go. So
yeah. What so we're running out of time already. But if people want to like talk with you. Maybe talk, Johnny, a little bit selfishly about your business. What do you do? Because I know you're consulting, you're helping on, you do a variety of things, and you're kind of with like a larger business and other folks and stuff too, right? It's not just you. But explain that a little bit. Like, if people want to talk more, how do you engage, and like, what does that look like if people want to hit you up after and want to engage with your business?
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity. I mean, the book is American Family Farmland. I
Yeah.
mean, you can go to americanfamilyfarmland.com. There's a section on, how to work with me, whether that's on a consulting level, our farm real estate business that I'm a part of. We've got brokers in Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan. We have a full-time appraisal team, so we do agricultural appraisals. We do farm management services across all of those states as well. So we do a little of everything. But American Family Farmland's the book website. There's a lot of those companion materials that they can, anybody on the that gets the book can just scan that QR code. And then our company is called Guess Wine Farm and Land. We've been in business since 1977, specifically in ag real estate, farm management, appraisals, auctions. But my calling has always been the family farm. I
Yeah.
learned a long time ago that everything that my grandpa taught me and all the years, sort of riding in the tractor cab with him, he instilled a gift in me that to work with families and help preserve the family farm in any capacity that I can. And
Yeah.
that's where I'm truly passionate about. Sometimes people will fly here to Indiana and come and stay at our farm, for a weekend sort of retreat getaway, right? Where we dive into all this, in a more intimate, sort of relaxed setting, away from their farm. We're like 15 minutes from the Purdue University Airport, so it's pretty easy for people to get here. We're only like an hour from Indy. So sometimes I have people that come right here to our farm, and we've got a cabin here at our place that my clients can stay at. And then, if the stars align, we may go, visit Rick Clark's farm. We may go visit Dan DeSutter's farm, and help bring some of that different perspective from some folks that are also multiple generation farm families that have
Yeah.
have spent a lot of years trying to figure out how to, one, preserve the legacy of their family farm, but also sort of diversify or reimagine it so the next generation can come in and, keep carrying the torch forward.
Yeah, and clarifying on that, so the land brokerage stuff, the three states, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and I assume you got to be licensed, and like, so that's kind of
Yeah.
restricted to that. But
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
consulting stuff, I assume it's not restricted by those geographies,
No,
right?
it's
Yeah.
not. I
Okay.
have clients in California. I have
Yeah.
clients in all the I states.
Yeah.
Primarily my
Okay.
clients are West Central Indiana, but I mean, I've got folks that I work with all over the country, and like everybody, my time is limited too, so I've only got a certain amount of hours I can dedicate
Sure.
to it. But I do love it. I mean, that's one of the things I
Yeah.
do love about my work, right? Is it's every farm is different, and everybody's circumstances are a little bit different, and I'm just fortunate that I can pass a lot of these lessons on to
Yeah.
help other families.
Well, I think how why you and I have connected so well so early in all of this, and have been buddies for years, is like our I feel like our missions are the same. We're just going about it in completely different ways, right?
Yeah,
It's preserving the family farm, preserving American ag, and we overlap on this whole health piece, right? That we're both,
sure.
where we connected and where we both resonate on. Um, and my piece, I'm trying to figure out how to do it with data, how to do it with technology, how to do it with telling our story, and like whether it be from carbon intensity or other stuff. It's our mission is to help a million family farms improve profitability via improving soil health. Right? I don't necessarily care where it comes from, but if the farm is going to be profitable, if it's going to be resilient, if the soil is going to be good, then we can have this conversation to be able to ensure that it's going to be good for more than just the one generation. I think there's a ton of overlap, and hopefully this has been good to resonate with everyone here. I'll let Diana pop back up the slides. Yeah, been a lot of fun for me just thinking through this. Obviously, tons more that and like nuances and stories and stuff. But yeah, everybody that was on, thanks so much. There's a ton of people that had registered that weren't able to make it here today. We'll get this passed along to you all. Johnny will be getting the book sent. I think Johnny, you didn't mention exactly, but folks who signed up and want a book sent, expecting that in another couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll get the book shipped out next week to everybody who signed up for the webinar in advance, and ground shipping, so they could expect to see their books in probably 2 to 2.5 weeks, give or take.
And they can buy it on Amazon. It's not expensive. I
Yeah,
mean,
you
you
can
you
you can buy
intentionally
the.
made it cheap
I
so that
did,
it can help as many people as possible, and
I
you're not
did.
getting rich off of books. Like you're
No,
trying to help other people. Trying to help people here.
yeah, I didn't write the book to sell books, Mitchell. I mean, I wrote the
Yeah,
book because I'm passionate about the family farm like you are, and if I can help one other farm family out there with a difficult decision, whether that's an emotional or a financial decision, I did my job, and that's kind of me, passing on, the legacy and the values of our own family farm. So
yeah, that's great. No, I love that. So yeah, everyone be expecting that coming up. The slide talking about research and development tax credits. Completely different topic than what we've been talking about here. We've been preaching about it a bunch. You should absolutely be looking at R&D tax credits for your business, whether you're a farm or other business. That does bring in. We've got another webinar next week that we are going to be really digging into tax prep and research and development tax credits with our buddy Paul Neefer, who's been on the show a couple times, but getting him back on to really dig into these R&D credits, it's a huge deal. But anyway, for now, as we wrap this up, Johnny, want to thank you again for hanging out and taking the time. Really, really good stuff. Lots to talk about, and like you and I were messaging before, yeah, I got some stories to tell sometime for sure. But
thanks, Mitchell.
looking forward to it. And yeah, webinar next week. Be sure to get registered for that. I don't think we're going to do a CI chit chat next week with this webinar coming up, but we will see how things keep progressing in DC. But yeah, Johnny, thank you. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
joining, and we will catch you next time. Johnny, any last word?
Just greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. I look forward to getting those books in the mail to you.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. See ya.
Bye bye.